There's a study out of Cornell. A gerontologist named Carl Pillemer spent years interviewing about 1,500 Americans over 65, asking them one simple thing: what do you regret? Not what do you wish you'd bought, not where do you wish you'd traveled. What do you regret? And the answers that came back most often weren't about careers, weren't about money. The thing that kept surfacing over and over in kitchen after kitchen was time. Specifically, the time they didn't spend with the people who mattered most. Not because they were lazy, not because they didn't care, because something else always seemed more urgent at the moment. And the thing that sticks with me about that research isn't the big finding. It's the word seemed. Because that's the whole problem, isn't it? Everything seems urgent until it isn't anymore. And then the thing you skipped, the recital, the Saturday morning, the long drive to see your mother when she could still remember your name, turns out to have been the only thing that was urgent at all. Let me be clear about something before we go any further. This is not a guilt trip. If you're watching this, you've probably already done more showing up than most people will ever understand. You drove carpool, you worked the overtime, you sat through the school play where your kid was tree number 4, and you clapped like it was opening night on Broadway. This isn't about telling you that you failed. This is about something more specific and more useful than that. This is about the patterns, the particular kinds of moments people look back on and wish they'd handled differently. Because once you see the pattern, you can actually do something about it. You've still got time. That's not a pep talk. That's arithmetic. So let's talk about what people actually regret missing. Not in the abstract, in the specific. The first one might surprise you because it's not a milestone. It's not the wedding or the graduation. The moment people regret missing most often is the ordinary weeknight, the Tuesday, the nothing special dinner, the evening where the kid wanted to show you something and you were on the phone, or finishing a report, or just too wiped out to engage. And I know how that sounds. Like I'm saying you should have been present for every single unremarkable evening of your child's life. I'm not. What I'm saying is that when people look back from 70 or 80, the big events are already preserved. There are photos, there's video, somebody gave a toast. Those moments are archived. What isn't archived is the weight of a 7-year-old leaning against your arm on the couch while you both watch something dumb on television. The phone call from your teenager that you let go to voicemail because you were in a meeting that, if you're honest, you cannot now recall a single detail of. A psychologist at UCLA named Shelley Gable has done work on something she calls active constructive responding. Fancy term, simple idea. When someone you love comes to you with good news, even small good news, even, I got an A on my spelling test, or I made the team, or, decades later, I got the promotion. The way you respond in that moment matters more than almost any grand gesture you'll ever make. Not because the moment is big, because the moment is a door. And if you walk through it, you're telling that person, I see you, and what matters to you matters to me. And if you're distracted, or you half nod and go back to your newspaper, the door still closes. It just closes with you on the other side. Now multiply that by a few thousand evenings over a couple of decades. Nobody misses all of them, but most of us, if we're honest, missed more than we thought we were missing at the time. Here's the second one, and this is the one that gets people right in the sternum. The last conversation with a parent that you didn't know was the last conversation. I'm not talking about a deathbed scene. I'm talking about the phone call you almost made on a Sunday afternoon, and then didn't, because you figured you'd call next week. The visit you kept meaning to schedule. The thing your mother said that you meant to ask her about later, except later turned into never, quietly, the way it does. There was a man in Pillemer's research, I'm paraphrasing, but the gist stayed with me, who said his biggest regret wasn't missing his father's death. He'd been there for that. His biggest regret was the 10 years before it, when his dad was healthy and willing to talk and he just didn't make the drive. Not out of anger, not out of estrangement, out of busyness, out of the quiet assumption that there would always be more time. And look, if you're sitting here and that one landed, I want to say something carefully. You're not a bad son or daughter for that. You're a human being who is running a household and raising kids and probably holding down a job that didn't give you a lot of slack. The system we built in this country, the way we scatter families across time zones and then act surprised when people lose touch, that system is not set up for staying close. You were swimming against a current and you didn't even know it. But here's what's useful about looking at it now. If your parents are still alive, you have information that your younger self didn't. You know how fast it goes. You know what a Sunday phone call is actually worth. And if your parents are gone, this same pattern is playing out right now with someone else in your life. A sibling, an old friend, maybe your own adult kid who lives 3 states away and keeps meaning to visit. The third moment people regret is the one where someone in the family was struggling and they chose not to get involved. The brother who was drinking too much. The daughter who was clearly in a bad marriage. The grandchild who got quiet in a way that didn't sit right. And you noticed. Of course you noticed. You've been reading people for half a century or more. You're not going to miss the signs. But you didn't say anything. Maybe because you didn't want to overstep. Maybe because someone told you it wasn't your place. Maybe because you'd tried once before and gotten your head bitten off and figured, fine, they can sort it out themselves. I understand that. Staying out of it is a form of respect, and sometimes it's the right call. But the research on this is pretty consistent. A large-scale study out of Brigham Young, published in PLOS Medicine, found that social connection and the sense that someone gives a damn about you has a measurable effect on whether people survive hard times. Not just emotionally, physically. The effect was comparable to quitting smoking. Comparable. So when you noticed something was wrong with someone you loved and you held back, you weren't just being polite. You were leaving medicine on the table. And the regret isn't, I should have fixed it. Nobody can fix someone else's life. The regret is, I should have said something. Even once. Even badly. Even if it started a fight. Because the fight would have meant they knew you were paying attention. Here's the fourth one. And it's quieter than the others, but it might be the one that matters most for where you are right now. People regret missing the shift. The moment when your relationship with your kid changes from parent-child to something more like equals. The first time your adult daughter calls you not because she needs something, but because she wants your opinion. The first time your son tells you something real about his marriage, not the polished version. The moment when they stop performing okayness for you and actually let you in. That shift doesn't announce itself. There's no ceremony. It usually shows up disguised as a slightly awkward conversation that could easily be brushed past. And a lot of people brush past it because they're still operating in the old mode. The mode where your job is to have the answers, to be the strong one, to hold it together. But your kid isn't asking you to hold it together anymore. They're asking you to be a person, a whole, complicated, sometimes uncertain person. And if you can do that, if you can say, honestly, I don't know, or, yeah, I went through something like that and here's what I got wrong, something unlocks that you can't get any other way. I watched a friend of mine, a woman in her early 60s, do this with her son over Thanksgiving. He was going through a rough stretch at work, and she could see it on him. And instead of doing the mom thing, the, it'll work out, you're so talented thing, she told him about a time in her 40s when she got passed over for something she'd earned, and how angry she was, and how long it took her to stop being angry. She didn't fix anything. She just showed him her cards, and I watched his shoulders drop about 2 inches. That's the shift. And if you miss it because you're still being the parent instead of the person, it doesn't come back around on a schedule. Now here's where I want to be honest with you about something that nobody talks about because it makes everyone uncomfortable. Some of these moments, you missed them because you were told to, because the culture you grew up in had very specific ideas about what a father does, what a mother does, what showing up looks like. Men in particular got handed a script that said your job is to provide, and providing means working, and working means being gone. And if you followed that script, if you missed the recitals and the dinners and the Tuesday nights because you were doing what you genuinely believed was the right thing, you were not wrong. You were working with the information you had. The regret is real, but the blame doesn't sit where you think it does. Women got a different version of the same trick. You were supposed to be there for everyone, all the time. And the cost of that was that you sometimes weren't there for yourself, which meant you showed up depleted, which meant even when you were physically present, you were running on fumes, and everybody could feel it. That's not a failure of character. That's a failure of a system that treats mothers like utilities. So what do you do with all this? You're not 50 years old standing at the beginning of the conveyor belt. You're somewhere in the middle or past it, and some of these moments are behind you. What's the use in cataloging regrets? Here's the use. You are, right now, living in someone else's future regret or future gratitude. Your grandchild is going to grow up and either remember that you came to the thing or that you didn't. Your adult kid is going to remember whether you called or waited to be called. Your spouse or your partner or your oldest friend is going to remember whether you were in the room or just in the building. And I don't mean that as pressure. I mean it as power. Because you know things now that you didn't know at 35. You know that the meeting doesn't matter. You know that the errand can wait. You know that the awkward conversation where you say the honest thing is worth more than the comfortable silence where nobody says anything real. You have 50, 60, 70 years of evidence for what actually counts. And if you're willing to act on it, you're more dangerous in the best possible way than you have ever been. Let me give you something practical. One thing, not a list. Call the person. You know which person I'm talking about. You thought of them at some point in the last 10 minutes. Maybe it's your kid. Maybe it's your brother. Maybe it's a friend you haven't talked to since the last time one of you was in the hospital. You don't need a reason. You don't need an occasion. The occasion is Tuesday. The occasion is that you're both still here. Call them. And when they pick up, don't start with just checking in. Start with something real. I was thinking about that time or I never told you this, but, or even just, I don't have a reason for calling. I just wanted to hear your voice. That's it. That's the whole thing. Not a lifestyle change. Not a resolution. One phone call that you make before the week is out. There's a line I read once, attributed to various people, so I won't pretend I know who said it first, but it goes something like this. Nobody on their deathbed wishes they'd spent more time at the office. And that's true, as far as it goes. But I think the more precise version is this. Nobody on their deathbed wishes they'd waited one more day to say the thing they meant. Your coffee's probably cold by now. Go warm it up, then make the call.